I've been waiting a very long time for this thing. This is the Hario Switch. It's a simple variation on a coffee brewing funnel, like so many of the other ones that exist. It's made of glass, plastic, and some rubber, and a steel ball inside. It adds up to be possibly the best method to prepare a cup of brewed coffee. It's essentially a hybrid between an immersion brew and a pour-over brewer. It's an ongoing debate as to which general method is better among these two. So an immersion brew, like a French press or an Aeropress, will have the coffee immersed in the brew water the entire time. Or do you get a better cup of coffee out of something like this? This is the V60 or a Chemex or a Kalita, which are much the same principle. They're both very good methods. They have merits. They are distinct and different. What I've got in hand right now might be the marriage and the best of both worlds. And if you're only going to buy one device, this might be the one to buy. So it's mainly a V60 funnel. A V60 has a hole through the middle, so the hot water spends time in the cone, and the only thing that prevents it from flowing through really quickly is the filter paper and the fineness of the grinds that you've got. The only difference is it's got this contraption on the end, which has a seal in it made by a steel ball interfacing to a piece of silicone or rubber. I'll make some coffee. 17 grams, medium coarse ground, 90 degrees Celsius for the water. I'll wet the filter and let it drain through, get rid of that water. That has the effect of warming up the cone a little bit too. The switch is flicked up, which means the cone is sealed. Add in the grinds, 30 seconds of bloom, get up to 220 grams, which gives you a mixture of 77 grams per liter. And at a minute 30, I hit the switch, the coffee flows through, swirl or stir just a little bit. Within 1 minute, it should be done pouring through. Now, I don't like referring to the V60 as a percolation brewer because there's something else out there that's actually called a percolator, which is essentially a horrible device that guarantees you a burnt taste and it has no business in your home if you want a decent tasting coffee. But yeah, often people refer to a V60 as a percolation brew because the water percolates down through the grinds. Now, while the Switch can be considered a percolation brewer, and it can be an even better one at it than the V60, I think the best way is think about this device as an immersion brewer first and foremost, and we'll get back to treating it as sort of a hacked and improved pour-over device afterwards. With an immersion brew, the prevailing and common knowledge is that you will tend to get a bolder, richer flavor coming out. And the reason is because the beans spend more time with the water and all of the notes that need to be extracted will be extracted. So if there's a predominant note in the coffee, like chocolate or something fruity, that will really shine through as best as it could. You will also get all of the oils and particles that are not dissolved coming through as well, especially with a French press that has this mesh filter. You might like that. That leads to more body or leads to more texture. What I just brewed up there was what I would consider an immersion brew because I had the seal closed for much of the time. That means all of the water was interacting with all of the grinds. And at the end, when I opened the switch, the hot water drained out. And in that time period, which is normally called the drawdown, in that time, that was a percolation brew. So it's a bit of a hybrid brew. If you get this device and your temptation is to use boiling hot water, which makes sense if you're using a pour over, but I would suggest backing off from that. 90 degrees Celsius should be your upper limit. With a V60, the brew temperature doesn't get up as high because a lot of that water is leaving. So it only really gets hot in the cone as the brew goes on. Versus with this, all of the water is there, so you're gonna get harshness, bitterness, and so on if your water's too hot. If you do use 80 to 90, 85 to 90 Celsius, you can enjoy one of the benefits of this thing, which it doesn't matter how long you let it brew, or it doesn't matter too much. Specifically, in that recipe I just presented, it was a minute 30. If you left it for 2 minutes and 30 seconds, it wouldn't make a whole lot of difference. You might be used to being able to brew 500 milliliters or more with a V60. You can make 4 cups of coffee. You can't do that if you're treating this as an immersion brew. The volume of this is no more than 250 milliliters. This is a 1 cup at a time type of device if you're using it as an immersion brewer. With a V60, you need fine control over your pouring style. You have to use a gooseneck kettle probably. With this, you could use a regular old kettle. Okay, so you've hit the switch at your desired brew duration, and now the brew is finishing off as a quote-unquote a drawdown. And now this is basically the biggest pitfall of this method, which is that you need to watch out for too slow a drawdown. That will screw things up. I'm not sure why, but even though extra time is okay in the immersion phase of the brew, extra time during the drawdown is bad. I think it's because the water is actually moving during the drawdown, and near the end you have not a lot of water interacting with the hottest part of the cone, the most extracted part of the cone. So you end up getting astringency or bitterness if it's taking too long. So you don't want that. If this were an Aeropress, you wouldn't have to worry about it. You could just press it through with the pressure of your arms and the problem is solved. But there's no means to do that here. Gravity is all you've got. And if you have a drawdown that's choking up or taking too long, sorry to say it, but your best bet is to close the switch, which you can, and leave that bitter part of your brew trapped in the funnel instead of being in your cup. And this excessively long drawdown thing is really only going to be a problem if your grind is too fine. So there is a limit to how fine you can grind if you're using this thing as an immersion brewer. On that note, James Hoffmann, who is a respected coffee professional and YouTuber, reviewed the Clever Dripper, which is a similar device, though not as good, but I'll get to that. And what he suggested there is put the water in the cone and add the grinds after. And that somehow has the effect of not clogging up the pores perhaps. So instead of a minute-long drawdown or a minute and a half, you'll see a far faster one, maybe 45 seconds or so. So I think that the best way to really reduce your drawdown and make sure you don't have a problem is to use a filter that flows faster. I use a reusable filter for that purpose. So this one's stainless steel. I found it on Amazon. I'll put the link down there. So yeah, that you go back to the problem of having sediment potentially, not a whole lot, but depending on your grind fineness, you might have sediment, but this draws down super quick. So you will not have that problem of bitterness, stringency, over extraction, and so on. Now, overall, purely as an immersion brewer, the Aeropress is probably technically superior. You just get more control with the Aeropress. The fact that you can just press it through by force means that you can venture into finer grind settings. You can make concentrated coffees, which you can dilute afterwards, which opens up a completely different taste profile. You can use different filter thicknesses and porosities and so on. Now, you just don't have that same level of tinkering and experimentation, which, if that's important to you, this is the ultimate for trying stuff and seeing what sticks. This, however, has a limited range of what it can do, but it will give you a great cup. And if you're only going to buy one device, like I mentioned before, this might be the best of both worlds. Now, let's talk about what happens if I use this as a pour-over device. You know, might I want to do that? And is it better than a regular V60 funnel? I already mentioned that if you want to brew more than 250 milliliters of coffee, you need to open up the switch so that water is going out as it's coming in. And you can do that with this device too. With a properly done pour over, when you have your grind fineness perfectly dialed in to extract the coffee perfectly, you will get a different taste out of the bean. It will not be as rich or as bold as what you might get with the immersion brew, but what it will be is a bit brighter, a bit sweeter. There will be a pleasant acidity that you like, and it's really difficult to describe it. So what you get is, instead of, if your predominant note of the bean is chocolate or fruit, but there's a secondary note there perhaps of something herbal or something of a different fruit, well, you will be able to find that if you used a V60. Other notes besides just the dominant one, which some people call the origin characteristics, will be able to come through. So why do I think this might be a better pour over than a non-switch equipped V60? Two reasons. Number one is the bloom. People go to great lengths to get all of the grinds wet right off the bat. You know, you can poke a little divot. People do tricks with a chopstick and make a swirl and so on. The idea being you don't want any pockets of unwetted coffee in your bloom. Right? But the problem is, as you're doing that, you're also losing some of that quickly brewed water. It starts dripping. So I don't know if it would be better to keep that in the brew for at least for a little while. So you have that flexibility with this. You can close it during your bloom and only open it after the 30-second mark when you're done blooming. You could open it halfway, 15 seconds, 20 seconds. So it gives you one dimension more of tinkering and customizability in your pour over experience. Number two is on the fly adjustments. So same thing, you can close and open the switch as you're brewing, and that might be to your advantage. So what if you're running a little bit fast and you basically went too coarse? You can close the switch and slow that brew down. I don't know if it will save the coffee, but it will probably take it in the right direction, and it might indeed make it far better, and that's a good thing. So those are two reasons why I tend to use the switch, even if I want to do a pour over. There is a competing similar alternative to this device. It's called the Clever Dripper. I mentioned it before. It's the same idea. It has a mechanism that plugs the bottom And to open up that valve in the case of the clever, instead of hitting a switch, you just place it on the actual vessel that you're brewing into, and that actuates a switch and lets the coffee flow through. And that's good, that works, and it's made of plastic, which is an advantage. I actually prefer that. It's got less thermal mass, less chance of breaking. But I didn't choose the clever, I chose this one. I wasn't drawn towards the clever. I just found this to be a bit more elegant to have the switch. I mean, with the clever, you have to start brewing with that device on the table, and then at some point you have to lift this mass of essentially hot water and place it, and to stop the brew you would have to lift it back up, and I didn't find that to be as elegant as it could be. I found this to be much better. Please let me know what you think. Do you use the switch differently? Do you agree or disagree with my review? Have you got any questions about this that I didn't cover? Please like or dislike or comment. On the coffee front, I have a few more videos in mind for this year, including reviews of 2 of the products I've backed on Kickstarter. Please subscribe and click the bell notification icon to know about those videos when they come out. And thanks for watching.